you've been to our any of our in-person events, you've seen these slides a number of times. Oh, by the way, my name's Patrick Mann. We've also got Anthony Schweitzer on the call, Brian Anderson. He's gonna talk about security for us here at the end. But most of you know and love us, right? So we're glad to be on here, and we'll come off the camera here in a bit so we can actually present this data. But little introduction, we are the engineers, the pre-sales engineers from the Eagle side, and that's really what Eagle's all about, is engineering, right? We have to think about security at the forefront of everything we do. We have to figure out what is the best in breed from a technological standpoint, and really vet systems and products that we sell, so that you don't have to go through these extra long POCs that we kind of go and do throughout the winter and throughout the summer. I mean, my hands are always in a POC somewhere, some way, and we're just really trying to make sure that we're bringing that best of breed, and that we're going to bring you a product that's going to benefit you and your organization and help you accomplish your business goals. Eagle's been around for 40 years, and like I said, we're engineering focused. We're very heavy engineering focused, and that's what we do for a living. So we do these things so we can help you. All right, quick recap. We started with backups. We went on to primary workloads, talked about business continuity to disaster recovery, which I thought was going to be a boring conversation. Turned out all right. And then last month we did security, which was a really, really great run through as well. So we have landed at cloud and SaaS operations, which really is where we usually ended most of those, right? We talked about what part of the cloud relates to those primary topics that we've discussed in the past. This one's focused on the cloud, so it seems like we're at the end, but we're really at the beginning right now. Time, we're going to finally answer that question, to cloud or not to cloud, right? And I'll probably find out the answer is, both, right? So I'm going to hide myself now. I'm sick of seeing myself talk, so I'm going to stop my video, and we can start to get in the meat and potatoes of this thing.
So I wanted to kick things off talking about an article that I read recently. You can see the URL down there in the bottom if you guys want to look this up. It was really insightful, talking about what Target has done and what their cloud journey looks like. And really, I think their cloud journey is what most CIOs are envisioning when they talk about the cloud. So back in 2001, they went all in on Amazon. So AWS, EC2, and they thought they were living the dream, right? Doing the cloud thing. And then Amazon decided to buy Whole Foods, which obviously buying a competitor, Target was not very appreciative of that move and saw it as a challenge. And so they started working on how to get out of AWS fully. They didn't want to support really a competitor, like I said. So Mike McNamara, he took over, let's see, I think it was back in 2015. So quite a bit of time to get to where they are at now, but I'll give some quotes up there from the article, but it was really cool to see how they were able to take all of their operations and they built it on an application layer that allowed them to run the e-commerce, all the in-store workloads, all of that into a single application that could run on different platforms as needed. So think of really utilizing vanilla cloud computing. And it allowed them to, what they do now is they utilize GCP quite a bit. They can bleed over into Azure if they need. And they also run on on-prem data centers because they already had sunken costs in those on-prem data centers. And it allows them, when busy seasons come about, they can expand their cloud footprint or their workloads up 20%, or actually 20 times. Yeah. That they'll have to burst during those busy seasons. So really cool. But one of the things obviously is it took time, 2015 to now, so 6-7 years to really get to where they're at, and they're constantly innovating. They also have, get this, over 4,000 engineers to work on this project. So really cool story. And like I said, I think a lot of IT leadership reads these stories and sometimes misses that it took a long time, and it took 4,000 engineers to really redesign everything from the ground up to be able to be this independent. One of the things here I love, it says, if you actually use the tool sets provided by the provider. So a lot of people go all in with AWS because they like the APIs, the tool sets, the different things that AWS's ecosystem has. Well, if you build your application, your business around that, then you do get locked in. And so it's something to obviously just be aware. We're not against cloud, and we don't want that to come across in this presentation, even though it might. But we feel like there's so much yay cloud everything that we're trying to put some guardrails and help people understand what workloads make sense, how you really have to do it if you're going to go full in, and that sort of thing. So
yeah,
anyway,
you're right.
Really cool article.
Yeah, it is a great article, and I think we've talked a lot about caveats here in this thing, and it's like you said, it's really not about scaring you away from the cloud. It's just making sure that you ask the questions that you need to ask, right? It's a really, the insight that Amazon was running their e-commerce stuff from a cloud standpoint, and they viewed them as a competitor, is something that not a lot of people might think about, at least initially, right? It's like, oh, these are the thoughts that you need to be having in your head. Is like, what happens when our application goes offline? Is it corporate espionage? Or these questions, these are questions that people are asking. And Target really did a great job as far as putting together their cloud strategy, from a hyperscaler standpoint, because that's what cloud is used for a lot of times, right? You do have data centers, but you need that extra capabilities, that extra infrastructure to burst to hyperscale into when you need it. And Target did a really great job at leveraging that stuff, right? They had very defined goals, what they wanted out of their cloud presence. They also brought all their engineering in-house. 4,500 engineers is pretty big. I mean, we talk about Eagle in our engineering, but we're still in the 20s as opposed to the 4,500 range. But bringing those engineers in-house, letting them understand what the goals are, how they were going to accomplish those goals, and working as a cohesive unit really helped them to maintain, to get that cloud independence that they were looking for. All their application development came from the ground up, and they were focused on where those focused on the applications on where it matters, right? Wherever those applications that their customers touch and things that their team members touch. Anthony, you can speak a little bit better about this, but really the whole platform, whether you buy something on Target.com, or if you're using your Target gift card, or you're on the self-checkout line, all of those interfaces are the same application. So they really focused in and really created this whole cohesive environment to run their business on.
Yeah, Shane mentioned that it's amazing how it's all a one platform, not a bunch of green screens over here that does inventory and something else over here to do their online. Yeah, but again, it takes time, to your point, and a lot of work and a lot of money.
Yeah, definitely. And then at the end of the day, they were living the dream. They were truly a multi-cloud, agnostic, portable architecture that they could run on-prem, in AWS if they had to, Azure, GCP, all those things. That's the dream, right? Have your applications, have your data, have your business portable, and be able to use any infrastructure that's available to you to accomplish your goals. So what does Target have that you don't have, right? I mean, Target really looks like the 6-time Super Bowl winner, Tom Brady. And maybe your organization really still just looks like that 6th-round draft pick Tom Brady that we see on the screen here. You're not to the point. You're not to the point where you're going to win 6 Super Bowls with your cloud strategy. I like the boos from the crowd. I really appreciate it.
It's so distracting seeing all the chats pop up, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, full disclosure, I don't know if you saw it behind me, but I'm a big Kansas City Chiefs fan. I work out of Kansas City, so this is difficult for me as well. I really wish this was a picture of Patrick Mahomes there on the left. But they had a strategy, and it took some time to get in place. And they also had a whole team around them, those 4,500 engineers. They had the Gronks and the Mosses, Randy Moss and the Julian Edelmans of the world. So they're going to make plays for you, right? And not only that, but they were working with different cloud operations, right? They were developing across all three of those. So they weren't just focused on the run game or passing to the tight end. They really were looking across the entire field and making sure that they had a platform that, their own internal platform that they could put on top of the infrastructure provided by these cloud providers. I see a lot of our customers more along the lines of working with just AWS or just Azure. And that's great because, you're still that 6th round pick and you don't have that 6-time Super Bowl championship money or the people to help you out with that, right? But I think the biggest takeaway from this Target story is, they had the leadership, right? They had the Bill Belichick of the world that was been really working on this for a long time, had a cohesive strategy, and was willing to take the risks and put the plan in place to make sure that they got to where that they needed. And in order to be a Target, right, you've got to have it all. If you're going to be truly multi-cloud, truly portable architecture and infrastructure, then you got to have all of these things. You're not going to win every year if you don't have the good people around you, the leadership around you, the motivation to do that. Which really, I was thinking about, what are some of our customers' motivations to go to the cloud, right? I don't know, Anthony, do we have a poll on that?
Oh yeah, we do.
So just trying to figure out what your motivations are, to get to the cloud. What are you using the cloud for? We see a lot of, we've got a lot of suggestions here for you, but I'm sure there are other reasons that you guys are going to the cloud as well. But the fact of the matter is that not everyone is trying to win the Super Bowl, right? Just like the Denver Broncos, as far as I'm concerned. People are going to the cloud where, if it's easy, right? Where maybe it's inexpensive. I like that we're seeing a lot of people come back with say, hey, it makes sense for a specific workload. That sounds great to me. I thought we'd have a lot more upper management is making me do it.
Only one so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No unused Azure credits as well. I thought that was going to be a big one too. That's what I hear a lot is, hey, we've got these Azure credits based on our Microsoft relationship that we need to use in the cloud. And really they're trying to do that. Then, they're trying to get you locked in, right? But really, some of the other motivations are you end up in the cloud with a cloud or a SaaS offering when you have to, right? The things like Office 365, mailbox or mail as a service, that's going to be your only option at some point. There are not going to be any more Exchange administrators on-prem anymore.
It sure helped when Microsoft released all those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, for
sure, 0
for
days
sure.
for Exchange.
Yeah, but you really what you need to be doing is using the cloud when it makes sense for you. And some of those things like it makes good sense for a specific workload, or it's less expensive than doing it ourselves. That's great. I'm glad to see those things as opposed to, hey, my CEO has a magazine subscription and watches the Masters and sees all these AWS commercials on a daily basis. But you don't have to try to win the Super Bowl to be to be in the cloud, to utilize the cloud. Not everybody's going to be the targets. There got to be some Denver Broncos out there that aren't trying to win, right?
Or they randomly just spend in areas to try to make their fans think.
For sure. Yeah. Let's get another washed up quarterback in here.
I just want to say that the poll's leading candidate would have been Bill Belichick is garbage had it been an option.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny.
So let's just focus on back. We had this 5-part series, and so we're going to kind of just go back and talk about what we talked about from a cloud perspective for each of those workloads. So we're going to start at the beginning. Backups. It seems like a really long time ago that Anthony and I were out here talking about backups, but really cloud and
With
SaaS
the flying tape. Everybody remember the flying tape?
I do remember that. I love that. I love that flying tape. It was great. So, but backups, right, is a great first step into the cloud, whether it's backups to the cloud, which is what we see a lot of, right? A lot of people are losing those DR sites, the infrastructure associated with an entire different data center that operates as your DR site. those are going away, right? I mean, a lot of people are cutting costs, and they still need that offsite copy. We still need to meet that 3-2-1, because if your data center goes under, we need a copy somewhere that we could rely on, and the cloud is a great place to do that. It becomes that de facto DR copy, and it maybe even makes a decision for you to migrate into the cloud on some workloads in the event of a disaster. Another thing that we see a lot of is immutable copy, whatever that means to you. We talked a lot about that in the backups presentation. Immutability means that you can rely on that copy. It's safe, it's secure, and whether they do that by API, by multi-factor authentication, any number of ways that we create that immutability, that write once, read many worm copy, you can do that in the cloud, right? We've talked a lot about archive copy as well, right? So you've got these big data sets that are vulnerable to things like malware and ransomware. And so to shrink your your blast radius, or the attack radius of one of those ransomware attacks, you can archive data that's cold, that's not in use, move it to a secondary site, move it to the cloud, so it's no longer vulnerable to those ransomware attacks. Makes up recovery a lot easier, a lot quicker, and really, again, keeps a lot more of your intellectual property safe. And then you've got to make that determination on whether multi-region or multi-cloud from a backup perspective makes sense to you. Other portion of this is obviously data that you already have in the cloud, right? You've got those IaaS workloads in there. Sure, there are built-in or included backup protection products associated with the major cloud providers, but is that giving you what you need? Do you have Linux workloads in Azure? Because as far as I know, they still don't support the Azure included protection does not support Linux backups. So those are the things you have to answer yourself. And then, SaaS and PaaS protection as well, right? You've got these applications running their databases in the cloud. What are you doing to protect those things? Obviously, we always go back and look at the shared services model and determine whose responsibility is it to complete this task. And quite often, most of those data, the data availability and the data integrity, those things are your responsibility, not your problem, but your responsibility.
Well, yeah. So, talking about the workloads just makes sense. So we talked about email, that makes sense. Seen a lot of people move ERP applications to hosted environments, and that's one that I think a lot of times people don't think about needing to protect. Like that's your business family jewels, and you might move it to like a mom and pop shop type setup where they're hosting it inside their own AWS or Azure tenant, but they're doing backups, but maybe it's only keeping a couple days. Does that really meet your retention needs? Do you have access to your data if you really needed to separate from them? Salesforce is another big one. At least we can do protection of that. So just thinking through some of those things is, again, just moving it out there. It's still your data. You still want to have a way to divorce them if you need to and keep the business operational.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, so all these, just another bunch of questions that we're going to ask, even if it's something like doing backups of the cloud or in the cloud or to the cloud, you have to have your ducks in a row to do that. So part 2, we focus on primary workloads. I actually stole this slide directly from that and put my little icon there. But really, these more questions when we're talking about what we're doing in the cloud. How do primary workloads make sense for you? Again, where you must, the Office 365, the Dynamics, these ERP SaaS offerings that you're pretty much being forced to go to. It makes sense because, well, what other choice do you have, right? And then what do you do about DR? These questions you're supposed to be asking yourself, hey, if my primary workloads are in the cloud, maybe I'm running some IaaS in Azure or AWS, what am I going to do from a secondary DR perspective? Do we go multi-cloud? Do we do multi-region? Do we bring that data back online, or back on-prem? And can we run those workloads once they come back on-prem, right? How do you design against a global cloud outage or a or a regional type internet outage? What do you do in that instance, right? You know, and then obviously the questions that Target had to face: are my applications designed for the cloud? Can I truly port these applications over to multiple cloud providers? And do my tools and skill sets, my staff, are they available? Are they ready to do these things? Can they complete this vision that I have to make sure that my primary workloads work in the public cloud? And then once you're reliant on these vendors, you know, do I have to have them for support? Can I use a secondary or tertiary support infrastructure to make these things happen? And you know, the real major question is, you know, what am I responsible for? What do they actually bring into the table from a public cloud perspective when we're talking about primary workloads? And again, with that, I really do go back to that Microsoft shared responsibility model that I would be completely remiss if I did not add this slide into a cloud presentation, right? You've seen it a million times, but this is what we're looking at. You know, from the left-hand side, or excuse me, from the right-hand side to the left, from on-prem to SaaS, you're responsible for everything, or you're just responsible for the data or the devices, the application and accounts that access that data. These, you have to have these fully vetted, fully functional before you can make that step into the cloud, or you're gonna step on some of those landmines. Basically, what we're saying is we're not trying to tell you not to go into the cloud. Let's just go to where it makes sense, right? And hybrid cloud really is really what we're talking about when we're talking about a cloud strategy that works effectively for the bulk of our customers and our users. We're, you know, don't just say no to the public cloud. Make it make sense for you.
Yeah, and don't just say yes. Enforce it there.
For sure.
It is interesting that like the use cases, the applications that are spinning up, like Target, it talks about them using Spinnaker, which helps them manage infrastructure across multiple cloud providers and push updates and patches and stuff. So like the environment's ever changing. And again, focusing on the workloads that matter, and then finding ways to rewrite and reinvent and do things a different way, but you could still do that with on-prem gear. I think people just think that the cloud fixes everything, and it's like, no, the application needs to be fixed first, and it can run on-prem. And then if it can run on-prem well, you can burst to the cloud, or you can move it to there. But the lift and shift just is never a good idea.
Well, and I think there's something to be said too about, you know, a hybrid cloud, or really a private cloud, right? I mean, there are some protocols, some applications, some data management tools that are available in the cloud that you can bring on-prem and utilize, things like S3 from a storage perspective. You know, if you need that type of capabilities, they're available on-prem as well. And so perhaps you can get that cloud-like feel with the same applications and maybe even the same consumption type model with an on-prem solution as well. So we're moving on to part 3 of our series. We'll recap on business continuity and disaster recovery. Another really nice lift of a slide that I think is hilarious. I love that that tornado that represents the disaster. We talked about what business continuity and the difference between business continuity and disaster recovery is concerned, and how the public cloud fits into that. You know, how do we get, you know, from a disaster recovery or a business continuity standpoint, how do we get our workloads and applications into the cloud in the event of a disaster, if that's what our business continuity or disaster recovery strategy is? You know, that we have applications that help support that. We have the SRMs, the Zerto, the means to migrate workloads from the cloud, or excuse me, from the premises data center to the cloud or between clouds, right? Do we have any automated steps that we can take to make this happen much more quickly? Can we reduce our disaster recovery timeline to make these things happen based on what we have in place? And then how do you come back, right, in the event of a disaster recovery scenario? You know, hey, your data center's back online. We don't want to keep having these, you know, paying these bills to the Azures and the AWSs of the world. We need to bring those VMs back on site. How are we going to do that conversion? And how are we going to bring that data back? And how can we do that the cheapest way that we can as well, keeping in mind the fact that everything is a cost in the cloud, right? And then most importantly, is it really going to be available when we need it? You know, there are cloud outages, there are global outages, there are regional internet outages, all these things that will keep you from using your public cloud if you need to. And then, hey, if we're already in the cloud, what is our business continuity plan if for those applications, the workloads from that standpoint? It can be a little bit more complex in the public cloud, right? You're gonna have to have a playbook that mitigates the complexity, right? The automation of the workload transformations, the way that VMs are built out in these different cloud-based hypervisors are all different. So you've got to understand and recognize and realize those things and make sure you have a playbook to make sure that happens. So, you know, it does sound like we've not, that all we're doing is focusing on caveats, but really, I think that's the best move, right? When we talk about caveats from a backup perspective, I mentioned this earlier, our native Azure backups don't support Linux. The data that you're backing up ends up in Azure still. Is that a 3-2-1 gap as far as your company is concerned? Do you feel good about where that data is? And then, you know, obviously the costs associated with those, you know, they might be separate products that are bundled together to make it seem easier to manage, but really the cost associated with those things is going to really rise exponentially. You know, when we're talking about backups in the cloud, you know, we're often talking just about snapshots, and the snapshot cost in the cloud means you're likely doubling the storage that you're using, things of that nature. So all these things, is it enough for you? Does it work for you? Can you afford it? These are the caveats to things like backup in the cloud. Excuse me, backup of the cloud into the cloud.
Do you know about the workload? That's the other thing, right? With so many departments spinning up workloads potentially, they might not get protected either.
Yeah, I think you know, with some cloud maturity with organizations, we're seeing a little less of that shadow IT, but it's still out there, right? I mean, definitely a great point. And then cloud outages, they happen all the time. I like to joke that Microsoft 365 with its 99.1% availability over the last years, it's more like Microsoft 363.5, I think, if I did the math right. So these outages happen, and you've got to be able to be resilient, and your business has to be resilient to get through these things. And so can you sustain your business through an outage if your entire infrastructure is hosted on a single cloud platform? You know, these are the things, these are other things that you have to think of.
Yep. Patrick, I would say that one of the reasons people are really happy to get on-prem Exchange out of their environment, right, and over to 365 is because their phones absolutely blow up when email goes down. But, you know, based on the numbers you just tossed out, that's still a day and a half of downtime every year. So.
Yeah, very good point. But it is easier to pick up that phone and say, hey, man, this is not my problem than it is to go, well, I think I just blew away the data store with database 3 on it, you know, so everybody M through S has no longer got email right now.
Yeah, shifted responsibility. Yeah.
I like to say that you don't shift responsibility, you shift authority, right? Ultimately, this is your problem, right? So that's just a little bit of my military background. You don't delegate responsibility, you delegate
shift
authority.
Blame. Exactly. That buck stops here. Just knock that off your desk.
Yeah, for sure. Well, obviously we've saved the best for last. Brian is on here for a reason. He likes to talk security. He's really good at talking about security, and it really is the beast as far as cloud infrastructure and workloads are concerned. When that blame has been shifted somehow, you've also shifted your ability to take it, to take responsibility for those things and secure your data. And you can't let that go by the wayside, right? You have to have security in place to make sure that those workloads are good to go for you guys.
Oh, was that my face that just?
That was your
there?
face, yeah. Yeah.
Scared me. All right. Well, Patrick, I really like this presentation and I love the sports ball references. So thumbs up. You could spend an hour on this topic, and I don't claim to be like a total public cloud security expert, but I can tell you what I've been seeing with our customers that have shifted some of their workloads out there, right? So if you go look at any of the major public cloud providers, they do a really good job at providing a whole suite of logging and security tools. I'd say that they do a better job than they do with backups and recovery. They have tons of logging options, identity access management, MFA, network segmentation, threat detection that's built in. They have granular network and application protection and policies you can set up. The problem that I see is the customers don't use them, right? And there's a couple of reasons for this, and I'll talk about it, but a lot of the environments, they end up like that layer 2 Wild West mentality that we saw in on-prem data centers 10 years ago, right? You've got this crusty hardened exterior, but once you get inside, all bets are off. And I think it's understandable for a couple of reasons. Most developers are focused on delivering features and functionality, and the infrastructure or security engineers, especially in mid-sized companies, they're less involved than they would be in an on-prem scenario. So what I often see is after the applications are deployed, sometimes they've been up for years, we see the security conversation come back into play. And it's really common for our customers to reach out and look for somebody that can engage in a consulting assessment, once again, after the fact, that recommends how to secure those environments. And of course, the funny thing is the consultants get paid a lot of money. We partner with a couple of folks that do this because they essentially remind you to turn all that stuff on that's already there, right? So it shouldn't be an afterthought, as Patrick has said before. And, really to get out in front of it, you either need to be a target, all right, and have those dedicated engineers, or you kind of need to slow down the process, especially if you have a separate dev team, and talk about segmentation and security and logging and audit trails and being able to perform postmortems if you do have an intrusion, right? So that's really all I had to say about that. Like I said, it could be an hour topic, and maybe someday we'll go for a full hour topic on this, because I think a lot of people are interested in this. But
yeah, I like that thought that you really have to slow down that development process, that rollout, so that you don't let the what do they call it, the horse out of the barn or something like that, or cart before the horse. I don't remember. I'm not really good at analogies outside of sports, but making sure that you have a plan in place when you're rolling out these things from a security standpoint. Just like we do at Eagle, you got to have security first before you start rolling these things out, right?